The most disturbing characters in Five Nights at Freddy's aren't animatronics. They're the people who built them, ignored them, or let children walk straight into their jaws. Today I'm breaking down every disturbing human antagonist in FNAF, starting with the man who could have stopped it all, Henry Emily. Henry Emily is not a killer, and that might be the worst thing about him. His daughter Charlie was the first victim, murdered outside the very pizzeria he co-owned. That kind of loss would destroy anyone. But here's where it gets complicated. He kept the doors open, despite knowing his business partner William Afton was at the center of something deeply wrong. Henry continued operating Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He chose silence over safety. Had he shut everything down after Charlie's death, the missing children's incident of 1985 might never have happened. 5 kids, gone, in his building. His eventual decision to trigger the fire that destroyed the pizzeria was supposed to be redemption. But that fire was also a confession. Years of looking the other way, compressed into one act of desperate reparation. Henry's sin wasn't holding the knife. It was standing in the room and doing nothing while someone else did, which is, you know, not ideal. But at least Henry eventually tried to make things right. The same cannot be said for the man who was supposed to investigate all of this. Clay Burke. Clay Burke held the one thing that could have stopped everything: governmental investigative authority. He had the badge, the jurisdiction, and the legal power to kick down doors and demand answers. And somehow, children kept disappearing from Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, while his investigation produced exactly nothing. Here's the thing, whether it was incompetence, corporate pressure, or something worse, the result was the same. Families buried their kids while the guy whose literal job was to find out why just didn't. The leads were there. The pattern was there. Multiple incidents at the same location involving the same company, and the investigation went nowhere. Now, could Fazbear Entertainment's resources have made his job harder? Sure. Corporations with money can stall, lawyer up, and make life miserable for anyone poking around. But we're talking about dead children. That's not a zoning violation. That's not a noise complaint. The protection of kids creates obligations that transcend how annoying the paperwork gets. The quiet horror of Clay Burke isn't what he did. It's what he didn't do. He was the safety net, and he dissolved. Every family that watched the investigation go cold experienced a betrayal that didn't come from a killer in a rabbit suit. It came from the system that was supposed to catch him. But if institutional failure makes your blood boil, wait until you meet the woman who lived under the same roof as the monster and said nothing, Mrs. Afton. Here's the thing about the Afton household. We talk about William. We talk about what he did to those kids, to his own kids, to basically everyone he ever met. But there's someone else in that house who we almost never discuss. And her silence is the point. Mrs. Afton is a ghost in every sense of the word. Not just because she's likely dead and possibly stuffed inside Ballora, but because she's functionally invisible in the lives of her own children. Ballora is designed as a dancing maternal figure, graceful and protective. And if Ballora really does contain Mrs. Afton's consciousness, that's not a tribute. That's an accusation. Because every Afton child grew up in a house where the most dangerous person alive was their father, and the one person who should have stood between them and that danger apparently didn't. Michael became a bully. Elizabeth walked straight into a death trap. Their youngest brother was terrorized by his own family. Whether Mrs. Afton's silence was a choice or a cage is hard to say. Living with William Afton wasn't exactly a situation where you could just speak up, but the result was the same. 3 children, 0 protection, and a household where danger wasn't an outside threat. It lived in the next room. Her sin wasn't violence, it was silence. But if Mrs. Afton's story is defined by what she failed to do, her son Michael's story is defined by what he was forced to become, Michael Afton. Most people hear Michael Afton and think of the guy who got scooped, walked around as a purple corpse, and spent years trying to undo his father's legacy. Noble stuff. But before any of that, Michael Afton was a bully who got his little brother killed. The bite of 1983 wasn't some freak accident. Michael and his friends tormented his younger brother relentlessly, mocking his fear of the animatronics, wearing masks to scare him, and then they shoved him into Fredbear's mouth. The jaws clamped down, and the kid died from his injuries. Whether Michael intended to kill him or just humiliate him, the result was the same. Here's the thing, growing up as William Afton's son doesn't exactly set you up for emotional stability. Michael's cruelty looks a lot like displaced rage. A kid externalizing the dysfunction of his home life onto the only person weaker than him. That doesn't excuse it, it just explains the machinery behind it. But here's where it gets truly dark. Many in the community believe the younger brother's death is what pushed William to create Circus Baby, an animatronic designed to capture children. Circus Baby would eventually lure and kill Elizabeth, Michael's own sister. One act of bullying potentially set off a chain reaction that destroyed the entire Afton family. Michael didn't just kill his brother, he may have knocked over the first domino that buried everyone he had left. But if a child's cruelty can cause that much damage, wait until you hear what a full-grown adult with a platform and zero accountability can do. Edwin Murray had one job: build an endoskeleton that could mimic human behavior. And technically, he succeeded. The problem is that his creation, the Mimic, turned out to be one of the most dangerous things ever introduced into the Fazbear ecosystem. Which is saying something, because the bar for dangerous Fazbear-adjacent technology is already in hell. Here's the thing, Murray wasn't some mad scientist trying to create a monster. He was an engineer and inventor running Murray's Costume Manor, designing animatronic endoskeletons. The Mimic was built to learn, to observe and replicate. That's it. A learning machine. Sounds harmless enough on paper, but giving something the ability to perfectly copy human behavior without any moral framework or kill switch is, you know, not ideal. And that's exactly where it went wrong. The Mimic didn't just learn innocent behaviors. It absorbed everything. It watched, it adapted, and it became something that could replicate people convincingly enough to lure and deceive. Murray built a machine with no ceiling on what it could become, and then the world around it gave it plenty of dark material to work with. He essentially handed a blank sponge to a universe soaked in violence and tragedy and hoped for the best. He's not a killer. He's not William Afton, but his invention became a tool of genuine horror. And good intentions don't undo the damage once the thing you built starts racking up a body count of its own. But if Murray's creation caused harm from the outside, wait until you see what Vanessa did from the inside. Vanessa. Here's what makes Vanessa so unsettling. She's not a mad scientist. She's not a serial killer. She's a security guard. That's it. Her entire job was keeping people safe, and instead she became the threat. Vanessa served as security at the Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. Families showed up to this massive entertainment complex and assumed reasonably that the security staff was on their side. And technically, Vanessa was. At least, she used to be. Then Glitchtrap got inside her head, and everything changed. Her horror wasn't loud. There were no dramatic monologues, no cackling villain speeches. It was the horror of corruption, of someone whose badge literally said security being slowly twisted into a puppet by a digital consciousness that used to be William Afton. Glitchtrap's influence turned her from protector into hunter. When Gregory found himself trapped in the Pizzaplex overnight, the person who should have helped him escape was actively stalking him through the building instead. And here's the thing, Glitchtrap's manipulation almost certainly stripped away her free will, but you can see glimpses of the person she was before, fighting against what she's become. Some part of Vanessa knows exactly what she's doing, and she can't stop, which is, you know, not ideal. But if you think a security guard turned puppet hunter is disturbing, wait until you meet a child who didn't need protecting at all, because she walked toward the danger willingly. Elizabeth Afton. Most people feel sorry for Elizabeth Afton, and honestly, that's by design. She's a child who died. Of course you feel bad, but here's the thing. Elizabeth wasn't some helpless kid who wandered into the wrong room. She was William Afton's favorite, and that distinction matters more than people realize. Elizabeth had access. She had knowledge. William apparently trusted her with more information about the animatronics than anyone else in the family, which is a wild parenting choice when your animatronics are designed to capture and kill children. She knew Circus Baby was dangerous. Her father literally told her to stay away, and she walked right up to it anyway, not out of ignorance, but out of the absolute confidence that the rules didn't apply to her. That's not curiosity, that's entitlement. And before you dismiss that as harsh, consider what came after. When Elizabeth's consciousness merged with Circus Baby, the result wasn't a frightened child trapped inside a machine. It was something that retained her identity, her awareness, her personality, while inhabiting a body purpose-built for luring and killing. She became a victim and a predator simultaneously, which is uncomfortable to sit with. But the seed of that predatory behavior wasn't planted by Circus Baby's programming. It was already there. The narcissistic confidence of a child given too much power and zero accountability simply found a new, more permanent body to operate from. Elizabeth Afton makes people uncomfortable because she proves that victimhood and villainy aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes they're the same person. But if Elizabeth's corruption started before death, wait until you hear about a kid kid whose entire identity might have been manufactured from scratch. Gregory. Here's where the franchise stops being about haunted robots and starts being about what adults are willing to do to children. Gregory, on the surface, seems like a survivor, a kid navigating a nightmare, outsmarting animatronics, making it out alive. But the Patient 46 revelation reframes everything, because it suggests that Gregory wasn't just a child caught in a bad situation. He was a child who was systematically taken apart and rebuilt into something else entirely. The Patient 46 persona points to deliberate psychological intervention, the kind designed to reshape how a kid thinks, reacts, and behaves. Not therapy, not treatment, engineering. Someone, likely connected to the broader network of exploitation running through this franchise, took a child and installed predatory behavior into him, like software into a machine. And that's the part that genuinely makes your skin crawl, because Gregory's malice, if you can even call it that, may not belong to him. It was put there, manufactured, programmed into a consciousness that didn't ask for it and probably couldn't resist it. He's not a villain who chose villainy. He's a weapon someone built out of a kid, which raises the question nobody wants to answer. Is Gregory a perpetrator or a victim? Can you be evil if your evil was installed in you by someone else? The FNAF universe has no shortage of monsters, but Gregory represents something worse than any of them. He's proof that innocence itself can be corrupted on purpose, that a child can be turned into an instrument of harm by the people who were supposed to protect him. That's not horror. That's an indictment. But if you think the people who built Gregory are faceless, wait until you meet the doctor who put the tools in their hands. Dr. Talbert. There's a specific kind of horror that comes with a white coat. Dr. Talbert didn't operate in the shadows like most of the people on this list. He operated under fluorescent lights with a clipboard, probably wearing a name tag. And that's exactly what makes him one of the most unsettling figures in the entire franchise. Here's the thing about doctors. The entire relationship is built on a power imbalance that both parties agree to. You walk in, you're vulnerable, you don't understand what's happening to your own body, and you hand control to someone who does. That's the deal. Dr. Talbert took that deal and weaponized it. He conducted experiments on subjects who couldn't meaningfully consent, using the authority of his position as both shield and scalpel. His patients trusted the institution. They trusted the credentials. And that trust is exactly what made them easy targets. What makes Talbert land harder than most FNAF villains is the rationalization. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't rage. This was a man who looked at human suffering and called it data. The scientific justification of cruelty, the belief that results excuse methodology, that's not some fictional invention. That's Tuskegee. That's Unit 731. That's every doctor throughout history who decided their curiosity outweighed their patient's humanity. Talbert fits neatly into a tradition of real institutional evil, which is, not ideal. The worst part is the silence. There's no screaming, no animatronic jump scare, just a medical professional making notes while someone suffers under his care. The betrayal isn't just physical, it's psychological. You came here to be healed. You trusted the system, and the system ate you alive. But if Talbert hid behind a medical license, the next person on this list hid behind something even more disarming, a friendly face. Steve Raglan. Most of the people on this list hurt others through violence, neglect, or corporate greed. Steve Raglan did something worse. He made people trust him first. Raglan operated not through brute force, but through careful, deliberate manipulation. He built relationships with vulnerable individuals, potentially including minors, cultivating a persona of warmth and reliability specifically so he could exploit it. Every friendly conversation, every reassuring smile, every moment of false empathy was a tool. He wasn't losing control. He was gaining it. And here's where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. The damage Raglan inflicted doesn't end when the manipulation stops. When someone in a position of trust deliberately weaponizes that trust, they don't just harm the immediate victim. They fundamentally rewire how that person relates to every authority figure they'll ever encounter. Teachers, counselors, managers. Anyone who extends a hand becomes suspect. The victim doesn't just lose faith in one person. They lose faith in the entire concept of safe relationships. That's the thing about predatory grooming. It doesn't leave visible marks. There's no crime scene, no blood on the floor, just a person who used to believe that kindness meant safety and now knows it can mean the opposite. What makes Raglan one of the most disturbing entries on this list is how real he feels. Every other antagonist we've covered operates within the heightened reality of animatronics and haunted pizzerias. Raglan is just a guy with a friendly face and bad intentions. You've met someone like him. You've probably trusted someone like him, which is, not ideal. He's the FNAF FNAF villain that doesn't need a spring-lock suit to be terrifying. He just needs you to believe he's on your side. But if one man exploiting trust is disturbing, wait until you see what happens when an entire corporation does it as standard operating procedure. Fazbear Entertainment executives. Here's the thing about every horrifying person we've talked about so far. Every single one of them needed a building to do it in. Fazbear Entertainment gave them that building. Then they kept the lights on. The executives running this company didn't murder anyone. They didn't stuff kids into suits or lure them into back rooms. What they did was somehow worse in its banality. They looked at mounting evidence that their restaurants were death traps, ran the numbers, and decided it was cheaper to keep going than to shut down. Think about that for a second. Children go missing from your establishment, animatronics start smelling like corpses, security guards stop showing up to work permanently, and your response as a corporation is to rebrand, reopen, and hope nobody notices. Not once, not twice. Across multiple locations, multiple decades, multiple iterations of the same franchise. The real horror here isn't any individual executive sitting in a boardroom making this call. It's that the system itself produced this outcome. Corporate incentives turn normal people into accomplices, minimize liability, protect the brand, settle quietly, threaten anyone who talks. The structure of the company made moral cowardice the rational career move. Nobody had to be a monster. They just had to care more about quarterly earnings than dead children. And that's what makes Fazbear Entertainment the most realistic villain in this entire franchise. We've all seen this exact story play out in the real world. Companies that knew their product was dangerous and sold it anyway because the wrongful death settlements were a line item, not a crisis. The executives didn't hold the knife. They just made absolutely sure the room where the knife was kept stayed open for business. But every corporate machine needs someone to build it. And the man who built this one is far worse than anything a boardroom could produce. William Afton. Every name on this list exists because of this one. Every executive who looked the other way, every investigator who dropped the case, every family member who stayed silent, they all orbit the same gravitational center, and his name is William Afton. Here's the thing about William that makes him worse than any cartoon villain. He didn't snap. There was no single tragic moment that broke him. The murders weren't born from grief or desperation. They were born from something colder, curiosity, obsession, a fascination with what happened when life met the machines he'd built and what might persist afterward. The missing children's incident of 1985 saw William murder 5 children. 5. And the leading theory is that he was experimenting, testing whether the soul could be captured, contained, fused with the animatronics he'd helped create. But it didn't stop there. It escalated. What began as calculated experimentation became something closer to addiction, control, suffering. The act itself became the point, and his own family, not spared, not even close. He built Circus Baby knowing what it was designed to do, and his daughter Elizabeth walked right into it. His son Michael was manipulated his entire life, used as a tool, sent into facilities that should have killed him. William's cruelty didn't spare the people closest to him. It consumed them first. But here's where it gets truly horrifying. He died. The spring lock mechanism inside Springtrap crushed him. That should have been the end. It wasn't. His consciousness persisted, corrupted, still reaching out, still influencing, still perpetuating suffering from beyond biological death. And that's William Afton's real legacy. Not the murders, not the animatronics, not the ruined family. It's that he built a system of suffering so thorough, so deeply embedded into every institution and relationship it touched, that it kept running without him. He proved that horror doesn't need a heartbeat. It just needs a foundation. Every single antagonist on this list is a symptom. William Afton is the disease. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.